it's a human right to be able to live where you've lived and not to be pushed out into other places where you don't want to live. I heard somebody once say, well, I'd like to live on Park Avenue and I don't get to, so what are they complaining about? Well, you know, maybe Park Avenue wasn't your home, but Provincetown and Truro are the homes of the people who are being displaced. So I find it, you know, just a matter of justice. The need for housing goes way back, and I've been here 35 years, and I was condoed out of my first apartment in 1982.
You have this population loss happening at a staggering rate in Provincetown, and I certainly, the data that I've seen suggests that it's definitely housing related, and it really relates to the conversion of condos, you know, single family homes being converted into condos.
You know, from my point of view, that is the thing that really contributed the most to the housing crisis here.
What we started seeing maybe, I'd say about 10 years ago, when the real estate really started to change in town to fewer year-round housing options, was that a lot of long-term seniors who were renting long-term. So we were helping seniors who'd been in their apartments 30, I remember one person over 40 years in their same apartment, who were losing their housing because either the homeowner had passed away and the house was on the market, or the real estate market was such that people were selling and starting, it was really getting condoed, so people either couldn't afford to stay there and buy something or just had to leave.
We had a very robust year-round housing stock at one point. And, you know, apart from that stock, we had summer rentals, which then in the winter turned into winter rentals, where people who worked 4 jobs, 3 jobs in the summer would have a very, very inexpensive winter rental because people wanted somebody in their home so that the pipes didn't break. There were larger houses. You could get them for very cheap. And people did, this was traditionally a town where there's tremendous creativity. So you had artists, writers.
What we see every spring and every fall is a couple more places want to convert to condos, so a few more people consistently, and a few people is probably on the low end. Sometimes it seems like there's 20 different individuals searching for housing at once. And you know, it's very interesting because they're in crisis, and that's why we're losing people. It's not so much that, you know, that there's not housing at times, because things come on the market and people can find it. And often if you have 6 or 9 months to really conduct a search for a new place, you seem to be more stable. But what happens is people get notice, they need to be out in 3 months. And so what's happened is people get really, you know, they're like, well, I can't stay in Provincetown, there's just nowhere for me to live. So they end up in Truro, Wellfleet, or as far up as Brewster or Harwich.
The people on the list of who needed housing, I mean, so many of those people are gone. They just couldn't hang on any longer. And so I think we just have to be cognizant that anything we can do, any strategy whatsoever, and I think, you know, HomeShare is a strategy that can be used and has been used very successfully in many parts of the country. But it's a slow strategy. It takes a while for people to catch on to it, to understand it, to not be afraid of it, to see that, oh, there's nothing to fear here. This is, it's all very safe and provides a good avenue to either having housing or having help with keeping your house if you're struggling. HomeShare program is a fairly simple premise. You have a home seeker, someone who needs housing. You have a home provider, someone who has perhaps an extra bedroom, access to a bathroom, either shared or private, access to kitchen space, and perhaps other spaces that they're willing to share. So in a way, it's a housemate situation, and you're hoping that the people will, the providers will understand and get behind the mission of what a home share program is, which is that you're not going to be gouging in rent, which happens here a lot. You're really wanting to give a fair rent for what you're providing, and you have the other side of the equation, which is the home seeker, who is looking for a fair rent or even a service exchange. And that's a big part of quite a few home share programs. You can do either a straight rent, or you can do a service exchange, which would be household tasks, for example, housekeeping, gardening, running errands, maybe grocery shopping, maybe some cooking. No hands-on care. It's not a home care kind of situation.
I've seen home sharing many times where it just simply started as renting a room, but over time grew into more than that. Even if it never became the renter offering assistance. I mean, that might be mowing the lawn, and it might be even more things like shopping or running errands for the person. But even without that, there's, we all need social contacts, and when it works well and there's respect of privacy, there's also, I think, that companionship piece that can really build for both. And that's multi-generational. That doesn't matter what age you are.
We had a housing summit, which was the second housing summit we had in Provincetown. And we had one in 2006, and we were lucky enough to get the consultant who worked with us in 2006, John Ryan, to come back and do a reassessment of where we were at after the actions we took between 2006 and 2014, and how we were doing. Well, it wasn't good news at all.
You're trying to fill a bucket with a hole in it. And so it takes an extraordinary amount of work to build Province Landing. It takes an extraordinary amount of work to create the 60 new units that are permanently affordable, or at least permanently available to residents in the town of Provincetown. And during that same period of 6 or 7 years, 350 units of multifamily housing converted to condominiums.
Of course, we had hoped we were going to hear different news. We didn't. And so we were all coming up with strategies, or trying to come up with different, kind of out-of-the-box strategies. And Nancy Lynch, who was the director of Helping Our Women at the time and was from Vermont, spoke about home share programs she knew about in Vermont, which have been very successful and around, operating for 30 years. And so that was seen by John Ryan and other people who stood up to speak at the summit as a really interesting strategy to get going on. So we had some meetings at the Council on Aging.
We talked about the possibilities and recognized that the gap in terms of trying to promote home sharing was a way to be able to match people. So the timing was right. I mean, Helping Our Women stepped up to the plate and connected with Homeless Prevention Council.
So Nancy was looking for a way to fund a home share program, and she became aware of the Community Health Network grant coming through the Cape Cod Foundation. And so she said, let's apply for this. She asked Homeless Prevention Council, Chris Austin is the executive director, to be partner because they needed a housing partner as well. And it's a health grant, so it was focused very much towards elderly, disabled population, and went for the grant and got it and hired me as consultant match facilitator, and that's how it got going. And we just got very active very quickly.
It really just step by step grew, and the part that those of us that began to talk about it, the part that we really needed was the part that they were able to step in and provide. So it was pretty exciting.
We did a lot of research on best practices, which meant consulting with HomeShare program managers all over the country. We joined the National Shared Housing Resource Centers membership, and they linked us up with these HomeShares all over the country. We downloaded every bit of information we could get about them and consulted by phone with quite a few who sort of mentored us, and they understood what we were trying to do. They had experience, and they helped us a great deal, providing advice, what to look out for, and also in some cases really sending us some of their forms, which they allowed us to either adapt, or we created our own forms, and some we did adapt from other HomeShare programs with their permission. We developed all the documents that would be necessary from those. There was quite a lot of research that went into that, and launched at the beginning of November. Quite an extensive marketing campaign, television, radio.
Do you need to reduce your housing costs? Are you tired of living alone? Or are you feeling that your home is too much to handle by yourself?
We had a lot of print media, flyers, brochures, presentations at libraries, councils on aging, and other venues. And it was quite a blitz that we've done in this pilot year. That's a very important part of a HomeShare program, and that needs to continue in each year, because HomeShare programs are hard for people to understand. It's a different kind of program. It's not like applying for affordable housing in a subsidized development, or it's not like anything else. The stranger in the house is a hard thing for people to overcome, and for the home seeker, for the living with a stranger. So one of the things, well, we have a process that helps move that along. So the very first thing we do is we take contact information. If somebody wants information about the program, we do have the brochures out there and flyers, and our other marketing ways of reaching people, outreach. But we have like a 10-page information packet, and that has a lot of details in it. But basically, we have people request it. They're telling us, that they're residents of one of the two towns, that they think they might be interested, and then we provide them with that information packet, which has a lot of detail in it. It also has questions for them to ask themselves. Well, there are questions you might ask about, how flexible am I? Do I enjoy other people? Do I really dislike being around other people? So that, you're knowing, okay, somebody prefers to be around 62 degrees. That's their optimum comfort zone. And the person that we might be thinking might be a good match for them, well, they've got to have it at 80 or they're completely miserable. So it has questions you wouldn't expect to see. And so by doing the application in the office, we're able to help you along, like when you say, why is that? Why are you asking me that? Well, here's why. Or if you take, medication for an illness that could be life-threatening, that's something that your housemate would need to know about in case you have an emergency. So some of the questions seem kind of personal, but they're meant to drive this forward so that the two people who finally get introduced have a better chance of being a good match than if they knew nothing about each other. We are facilitators. We don't make any of the decisions. I think, we suggest, we recommend. It's a very gentle process. The references, we we have a standard set of questions, and we do that on the phone, and people are enthusiastic about recommending people that they like, and you know, it's bringing them into the process too. And then, you know, when you get to the point where you have somebody completes their whole application process, and you have somebody that might be a good match for them, then there's an introduction. And that is facilitated. That would be at the office. And so you're introducing the people to each other, and they get to ask questions and see how they like each other. If they like each other, they might have coffee together a couple of times, or tea, and get to know each other a little better. And then another protection is there is a 2-week trial match period where the home seeker could live with the home provider in a sort of light way, not give up their other housing or move everything in, and then at the end of that trial match, if they really feel they want to go forward, then they do, and then there is a living together agreement. And again, this is a very flexible document where people might have concerns about how you would do this or how you would do that. What do you do when the dishes are in the sink? Okay, come to agreement over who does what and how to navigate living together. It's a month-to-month agreement. It's not like a long-term lease. It's based on, you know, mass housing, fair housing law, and you have to, if you decide to leave that situation or you want the person to move on, you have to give them 30 days notice or a month, whichever is the longer period, and in writing. That's very standard. And if there are problems within the relationship that arise after, you know, you've been living together for a while, something comes up that is making one or the other person unhappy, we're here. We're here to come in, or even on your own, just say, well, this isn't going well, this has arisen, it's making me unhappy, what can I do about it? And, you know, seek some advice. So, you know, Outer Cape HomeShare, we're here to support the relationship and do whatever's helpful to keep the two people matched. I know from other HomeShare programs around the country, people end up just being so glad that they have that other person with them. You know, whether it's somebody who's older and not as able as they once were, or they've lost a spouse, or they're living on their own now and they're not used to that. To have the presence of somebody else in the house can be a really wonderful thing. To come home, and for the seekers, to come home at the end of the day and not be coming home to a dark house.